Hi.
Much.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, wow. Nice. So nice to have you. I don't know if any of you were here earlier, but I was alluding to some of the conversation that we're about to have now, because one of the things that came up in the conversation with Andy Dunn, who founded Bonobos and who, as he described himself earlier this morning, burned through a lot of venture capital for a lot of different reasons. Some of it was just experimenting with some things he thought might work, and some of it was marketing that he realized later he didn't really need or didn't need in that way. And it raised the issue, and Eunice, I'm gonna start with you on this subject.
Sure.
It raised the issue of thinking about the decision to take on venture capital. And you yourself are thinking about this a great deal. Can you share with us what some of your current thinking is on the subject?
Do we have any investors here? So it's changed a bit. So my business is Material, and we are a direct-to-consumer kitchenware company, all about inspiring and delighting the home cook. And when we first got started, capital was important to us to raise because we are creating a product. And so whereas there are other companies that are in the services industry that may not necessarily need to commit as much capital up front, we knew that we were going to need capital in the door early on in order to create the best product possible. And for us, it wasn't just one item. We were very ambitious, and we went out and said, we're going to design 7 items, launch it as a collection, and that's how we're going to get started. So in the beginning, we did go down the venture capital route. We were very fortunate to meet some amazing investors who are in this direct-to-consumer space. And as we've progressed, we've been around for a little over a year, I'd say our needs have changed from a capital perspective, and what we know has changed a bit. And I think at the end of the day, our latest thinking on it is we bring in capital when we need capital from individuals with whom we want to be partnering with. And it's really a shift from, I think, a lot of direct-to-consumer companies that just went guns a-blazing and said, the more capital in the door, the better. We're just going to keep pumping money into the business. And I think what we realized, my co-founder Dave and I, was we wanted to build a business that was sustainable, number one, a business that we felt really had our fingerprints all over it and wasn't necessarily at the mercy or at the maybe whims of anyone outside of the core team that was working on this on a day-to-day basis. So we've started to shift our thinking a bit away from just trying to go and do series after series after series and really think, what does the business need first? What are our milestones to get there? And then how do we capitalize that? So instead of asking for capital first, we've shifted the narrative a bit and started to really focus on if we had no money, what would we do with the business? How would we still build a meaningful business that affects our consumers' day-to-day lives, regardless of where that funding is coming from?
Yeah. Well, and Britt, I wonder how you feel venture capital changes the tempo of what you're doing, and for you, how it sort of dictates the pace at which you've got to move, right?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting perspective. The way that I think about it is the number one thing that it changes is speed. So I think about this in the context of Shoe Dog, which is an amazing illustration of how Nike was built. And that obviously is an inspiring retail business, one of the best, and it took a really, really long time to get there. And he was mortgaging his house a couple different times, borrowing money, all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden you have something like Allbirds, which is raising $10 million and gets to achieve comparable scale very quickly. So I think the first question you have to ask yourself, if there are people in the audience who are thinking about doing this, is do I believe that this has venture scale? And then second, do I have the appetite, and do I think I can build a team that would actually allow us to get there as quickly as possible? So a 30-year process compressed into 2 or 3. I think a huge advantage of taking money is that you are able to hire best-in-class talent to the degree that you're able to attract it, and that accelerates everything. The flip side of it, as you're alluding, is that there's really high expectations to get there, but if you believe you have a business model and you've tapped into a consumer behavior that people want, then I think it's absolutely worth it. You could also end the question with, actually, I don't think that this is going to be venture scale. I think it'll be a much healthier business, and I'll have a much higher % ownership of it if I just fund it some other way. So I think that's the first question to ask.
Right, and really your appetite for wanting to take on the lifestyle that commitment financially requires. And you and I have talked about this as well, Nicole, that it part of what I want to help the audience to understand is sort of what happens to your life when you sign on for this commitment. I want to make this real for the audience, you know?
Your life becomes non-existent because, as Britt alluded, you're expected to build a business that, you know, a thoughtful entrepreneur might take 30 years to build in a really short amount of time. And so what that requires of me as a founder, or really any founder, is a certain amount of rigor that is not normal or always healthy. So yeah, you work 24/7. The pressures are, ridiculous, and the expectations are, also very, very unrealistic.
Well, so and do you feel that way? Do you feel that they're really unrealistic? That the growth projections or how they're asking you to scale?
When you think about a venture model, right, they're expecting you to build a business that can get to $100 million in revenue in a few years, right? And that's not realistic for most businesses. That is not an easy thing for any business to do, no matter how, no matter how much capital you have. And so, Nike wasn't built in a day, Walmart wasn't built in a day. When you think about these legacy brands that have been around and that are still dominating today, they're not businesses that were sort of forced to grow to a scale that they are in 10 years or less, or 8 years or less,
Right. And is that, Britt, what you found as well, that the expectation is, I don't know if it's $100 million, but that in this very compressed period of time, you've got to get to a certain place, or we don't want to continue?
I think that's right. I think that if you take on capital, you're basically making the claim that I am impatient. I think that this opportunity is now. I think the market is big. I think that the demographic we're going after right now are the 28 million millennial households. They are buying furniture now. They are buying houses now. Right. We want to be the category king. And so for us to have that sense of urgency is really important, and to have capital to fuel that is also really important. I think that, I believe that we can build a really big business based on the fact that we hold no inventory, we can scale really quickly. And so for us, it's like, let's just get there as quickly as we can, while being really mindful to all the things you guys are alluding of, are we putting thoughtful practices into place that this is sustainable?
Right.
Yeah. And the flip side of that is, typically if you don't meet those milestones, it becomes harder to raise venture capital. And when you've built a business that's reliant on a certain amount of money to continue growing and scaling and marketing, and you're unable to continue raising capital, your business will die. That's why so many companies shut down.
Right. Well, so and as part of that also, it starts to feed on itself, right? So to raise more capital, you need to keep boasting about the capital you've already raised, right? And that's part of oh my God, did you see the 10 million that we just got? Because guess what? We need 10 million more from you. Yeah. So right. And Eunice, I get the sense that you're feeling like that's not necessarily a treadmill you want to get on.
I think the reality is there's so much access to different types of capital these days, and I think there's almost a laziness factor of just going to the place that everyone else is going to, right? You can go to a clear bank and get marketing funding, right? You can go to a number of different other capital sources to help fund your inventory. Flexport, if anyone's using them for freight fulfillment, they will actually also help provide financing on the shipments that you're bringing in. So I think it just goes back to being really wise about what is the type of business that you're building, and what types of capital do you need in order to create the business that you want to build. And I think what happens a lot of the times in the D2C space is people see the Aways, the Allbirds, and they say that's the only way. And I think what I'm really encouraged by in knowing Nicole, in meeting Britt, there's so many different paths to build a really meaningful business. Not everything has to look the same. And I think that's why for us, we're saying, hey, never say never. Are we going to go out and do another big raise? Potentially. Do we also want to be in a position where we make the call and it's not investors saying, hey, if you don't do this by that certain date, then you're going to be gone tomorrow? That's not the type of business we're building. We really feel as though the kitchen is a place where there's so many different types of people cooking these days who have such different needs that the traditional guys are just not meeting. So there's enough room for some of the other players that are getting into this space as well, such that speed, yes, it does matter, but we want to be best in class, not just first in class.
Right, right. Nicole, you mentioned that, so Nicole's business is a paint business. So she said, Dennis, of course I had to raise venture capital. I'm making paint. So it was necessary for you.
Yeah.
Is it necessary for the next step that you want to take with the business? Or can you get to where you need to get to next without continuing to take on?
I think we're still so early on in our life cycle that I think we need it to get to that next set of milestones. Our business is really capital intensive. Manufacturing paint and shipping paint and fulfilling all of, in the way that we're doing it is a tough thing to bootstrap. And so, we'll probably continue to raise venture for a little bit, but like Eunice, also starting to think about alternative types of capital. What I call sexy VC isn't always.
Ooh, what's sexy VC?
Sexy VCs those are the ones that you hear about, the funders of Warby Parker and Casper and Away, and those sort of glamorized VC names. But those are the types of funds that are going to have those unrealistic expectations. There's much more patient capital out there. Things like family offices or family-run funds where, it's their own money and they don't have LPs, to report back to. And so, they have a different type of expectation. And so starting to look at, what's the right model for Clare and, what other types of investors are out there for sure is something I'm thinking about.
Okay, so you get a sense of who the different investors are and what their tempo is like.
Yeah, absolutely. Every fund has a different philosophy, has a different set of criteria that they're looking for, and so as Eunice alluded to, there's lots of different types of capital available, and so will we continue raising venture dollars from sexy VCs for the rest of our business life cycle?
Yeah.
I don't know, but.
The idea it could be a risk to Eunice's health.
But I mean, the idea that there is capital out there that will allow us more time to build the business thoughtfully is definitely appealing to me.
So Britt, you mentioned, so the great thing about raising the capital is that you get to go out and hire some of these world-class people who can also help you move the business along much more quickly. Mm-hmm. What else are you putting money towards today? Where's your money going? That you've raised.
Mm-hmm. Great question. I think so. Hiring is a huge, first and foremost, the biggest priority. I think I don't want to sound like Andy Dunn here and saying burning through money necessarily, but I do think that experimenting is part of the game. So really understanding, okay, we know that Facebook ads are going to work, but we also know that that's unsustainable. So what are the 10 things that we can experiment with and learn quickly from? So being thoughtful about deploying money into different marketing channels is a really big part of the business. We invested a lot of money. So this is specific to our business, but this would apply to anyone of figuring out where they're differentiated. We invested a lot of money in the beginning in thinking through how to do 3D modeling so that we can create images faster than traditional photography and therefore bring product to market faster than anyone else. So there was sort of foundational investments in the business that I'm sure if you have an idea in your head, you know exactly what that is for your business. Those are kind of the three main things: team, marketing, then the bits of the supply chain where we really wanted to set up foundational success. Something that's very special about our business, which is why I do believe it has venture scale, is that we don't have to invest in inventory. And I think to your point about ClearBank and other types of loans, obviously venture is a really expensive way to fund inventory buys. So I think it goes back to this question of being really honest with yourself about how much money does this need to grow? What does success look like? And who is the right capital partner for that?
Well, and Eunice, you talked about growing a meaningful business, and I'm wondering what that means for you.
Right.
Because one of the other things that we constantly talk about in this space is where is profitability, and where is enough for it to be meaningful for you, regardless of what scale it might appear to be from the outside.
Yeah. I think for us, how we're defining, a meaningful business is twofold. So one, you nailed it. I mean, being much more conscientious about profitability. And I think that means you just have a little bit more control over the destiny of your company, because you're not having to go knock on, your parents' door and say, hey, I need a little bit more money. We need to be able to fund this, give me something more. So we're able to prioritize and make different decisions because we know that we can get to that profitable place, and that there are really strong signs in our business that allow us to know, hey, it's not going to take us that long to get from point A to point D, and here are kind of the steps that we can do, that we can build out. I think the second thing is, we define meaningfulness in terms of how we define success when it comes to our customer base. So a lot of startups, I feel like, go really quickly to go as wide as possible. Like, it's like the spray mode attack where they're just like, okay, let's fire everything out there, try and cast our net really wide. Yes, you have an audience that you're going after, but you really want to make sure that you're trying to get to as many people as possible. And the decision that we made as we started to build out our business is we said, wow, some of our early customers, they're so loyal, and they're willing to buy a lot of different things from us because they're seeing the system that we're building in the kitchen. So we started to prioritize, lifetime value, which you hear a lot about. You hear all these different, acronyms in the digital marketing world, or how people are assessing their business. We said we are willing to invest if we know that that person is going to be in it with us for the long haul, and they're not just going to be a one and done type of customer. So meaningfulness for us meant, okay, let's try and kind of get immersed in their world and understand what else they need. So for us, that meant being much more, I think, just efficient and faster at bringing out new products. And understanding that we can really target and go deep with this set of consumers, as opposed to trying to just spray it so wide, so far, so fast, that at the end of the day, again, you have one single product and then you're trying to build your next one, and it's maybe years later. We took a very different approach there.
Right. And this notion, Nicole, of staying close to your customer, right? And understanding what they're really looking for from you, and hoping you're going to be working on next for them. How do you stay close to your customer?
Yeah, we stay close to our customer in a variety of ways. We are super active on social media, and we're engaging in one-on-one conversations with them all the time. So we hear the feedback. If customers are asking for a certain type of finish, or do you have paint for exterior, we're listening to that and we're reacting. Through our CX channel, customers email us every single day. And we take that feedback and we use that to make decisions in the business. And so, staying close to your customer in that way is what helps you continue to be innovative. We're not here, just trying to sort of dictate products. We're here trying to deliver products that we know people want. And the best way to do that is to listen to them. We launched a campaign earlier this year to have our customers help choose our next paint color. So we're really empowering them to be a part of the product development process, and to really take part and take ownership in the brand. And that also is what I think helps build that lifetime value and that customer loyalty, is when they feel a sense of connection to the brand.
We talk so much about customer acquisition costs, right? You don't get to sit down with an entrepreneur and not have some kind of conversation about that, right? And we all know it's this wildly competitive space, and that small businesses just can't afford to play in that arena, right, Britt? And so right? So what do you do instead? What is the clever marketing that the inside, right, brings to market and thinks about? How do you work around that?
Mm-hmm. So I can tell you what we do, and I can also tell you what I think kind of the overarching philosophy of it is, and that is, it's in some ways it's never been easier to just launch a product into the world. You can open up a Shopify account, you can get a really cool Instagram handle, everyone has access to great imagery online, you can pull stuff together, and so it's amazing that you can just kind of create something out of nothing. At the same time, it's never been harder to kind of cut through the noise because there's all these voices out there vying for everybody's attention. And so I think the question becomes, what is special about what you can accomplish, whether it's your business or your team or your product, that creates a new channel? And what I mean by that is, this is my favorite anecdote about Hims, which you may or may not know. It's a men's hair care and a variety of other things.
Not a customer of the product, but I am familiar.
But anyway, there's this anecdote. He says this on how I built this, so it's out there for people to get the level of detail they want. But basically, he had this insight that, our customer is a man, and we want to capture him when he's by himself, kind of thinking about his wellness. And so why don't we rent out space? Why don't we see if we can convince gym owners if they'll let us take out billboards in the locker room? Whether or not that's urban legend or something he just says, or if that's true, it's a really good idea that I think captures this sentiment. So the way that looks like for us is, we're able to create images, as I mentioned, really quickly. And so rather than compete with media outlets, trying to build our own content channels, we want to work with them and see if, they can use our stories, and we can partner with them. So it's one of the channels that we think we've kind of created on our own. But I think it's really hard, and you have to think about, what do we do that's different so that we're not just relying on the known entities that 10 years ago were cheap and new and now aren't.
Yeah. And I mean, earlier when we were talking with Andy Dunn, who started his company in 2007, there was just so much.
Facebook was cheap then.
Exactly. and people weren't using it in that way. But the other point that you make, and this notion that so many people have come into this space, and when I think about people in the audience here today who are thinking, is this the right time for me? What should they be thinking, Eunice? What should they be? I mean, you're so thoughtful about, as we talked about earlier, about whether to take venture, not take venture, how many items to include in our product offering. I mean, what's your sense? I mean, does this seem like a good time?
Gosh, well, I don't know. It depends on what you think, whether or not we're going into a recession or not, because that's a whole other,
great point. And
but it's something that we think about. I think it's kind of what Britt was saying, just in terms of, do you know what the core differentiating factor of your business is, number one. And number two, because product is so easy to create, and you can go out there and create something that looks legit, I think it goes back to, are you tapping into something emotional with that set of customers you're trying to go after? And I think that's where it's truly not a science. I think it comes down to the vision that you have, and whether or not you are that one company and that one leader who can stir something up emotionally in the people, right? And I think it can't just be, it's a large industry and this slice of it I'm going to disrupt. That's all shop talk, right? That's what the people who are going to fund your business, or the people who are going to partner with you early on, that's what they care about. But at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to, will that consumer lock into what it is that I do and advocate on my behalf without having to be told so, or without having to be paid so? And the only way that happens is if you've connected with them emotionally. So I think it's a very kind of woo-woo answer, but I think it comes down to that level of just insight in what it is that you're bringing, and how you're going to ultimately execute it, so that it's more than just a standard business plan.
Yeah. And you feel that way too.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%. I mean, we have two different customer segments. Like, we have our sort of DIY homeowners, and then we have the trade. And so for our homeowners, for us, it's like we're not selling paint, right? We're selling this idea of a beautiful home, and that's what they're buying into. They're buying into this end result. Once they paint, how their space is going to be transformed, and what that's going to do for them in their lives, right? And then when it comes to the trade, you know, we really look at, we're here to be your partner in creating this beautiful project for your clients. We make it easy. Anything that goes wrong, we've got your back, and that's really what I believe sets us apart.
Right.
And I think without that emotional connection, you know, it is hard to differentiate.
Well, and that's one of the big challenges too. So when you're small, you're staying really close to that customer and you're solving that customer service issue, often personally, yourself. And that makes your customer feel really special, that the founder is so involved, and obviously you can't possibly scale the business and continue to do that. So how do you still delight this customer, Britt, while you grow the scale of your operation enough to take care of those earlier mentioned venture capitalists who are looking at their watch going, when am I getting my money back?
Yeah,
Wait.
I feel like this is a pitch. Tough questions.
Well,
I love how you framed it, Eunice. I think that I agree. Like, what ultimately we're a consumer-facing business, and so we have, we're trying to. Our mission is to make home your most meaningful place. Which I think is a mission that'll probably resonate with this group. We believe that real life happens at home, not in experiences or traveling, and we want your home to be your ultimate destination, and we really, really believe that. And so a priority of mine is to make sure that, that the company culture really celebrates that, and that everyone is on board with that. I think this is a Khosla quote. This is not original to me, but ultimately the team you build is the company that you build. And so Lindsay, on our marketing team, and I were just talking about this earlier. I think it's really important that ultimately getting to start a business is a privilege. And I think everyone on our founding team is an entrepreneur. And so I think making sure that we can do everything possible, that everyone really believes in the mission and that we have what it takes is ultimately what will get us there. So, I certainly used to run customer service, which meant responding to the emails in my pajamas. And luckily we have someone running that now, but I think she puts her heart and soul into it. Yeah.
As I was thinking about this conversation with all of you, and we've only got a few minutes left, but I wanted to end with, if your really good friend was coming to you and saying, listen, I've got this great idea, I think it can be a direct-to-consumer product, what's the advice that you would give them? What do you think is the most meaningful thing to tell them? Eunice, I'll start with you, and I'll take all three of you.
I think for me it would be find someone incredible who balances you out that you can build the business together with. And I think that's something I have a co-founder.
So you have a co-founder, David,
very complementary skill set. I mean, like
yeah.
yin to my yang, like very, very different. And I think that's something, whether it's someone who's co-founder by title or a community of people you can go to that understands this world that you're about to step into, I think it's really important. And God, I wish there were more founder support groups that were like out there for people. I mean, informally,
who could share this very kind of advice? Yeah.
Because you go through.
You guys have been that for each other.
I mean, pretty much. We're like around the corner from each other. I call Nicole if I need.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
But it's just find people who can support you in it. And I think sometimes people think they're helping you by helping perhaps ask the difficult questions, and they're always kind of playing devil's advocate and poking into it. And honestly, sometimes in the beginning, you just need someone who's like, this is a great idea, go do it, and support you. And I think that's so critical and so important, because you really do dedicate so much of every fiber of your being into the business. So I think finding someone either to build the business with or that support network that can help you get through the first couple of years.
Yeah. Nicole?
I would say, like, on the marketing side, have a very, very clear vision. and a very clear value proposition, because without that, it's hard to cut through, because you can have all the support, and I agree 100%. You have to build a great team. You need partners to help you, because no one can do it alone. But you also have to think about how you acquire customers, and I think having that very, very clear vision for your company and how you want to build it and what your value prop and your messaging is something you need to be thinking about very early on.
Right.
I would ask two series of questions, one practical and one more emotional. So the practical would be, what are the risks and how can you mitigate them? Like, if you put a Facebook ad out, will anyone click on it? If you put a URL, will anyone visit it? Do you, if there are things that have to be true about certain suppliers, like, can you prove those things true before you commit to this? Like, how do you just knock off some of the major hypotheses? And then on the flip side, in terms of kind of the emotional stamina that I think you were alluding to, it would just be like, will you regret not doing this? Mm-hmm. Do you believe this has to exist? And can you imagine doing anything else?
Yeah.
And I think if the answer is no, then you have to do it. And it might be a bad idea, but you got to do it anyway.
Okay, fantastic. Well, there you go. Great advice. Please thank Nicole, Britt, and Eunice for joining us. Fantastic. Thank you.